Hello and welcome to the Inquisitorial archive. My name is Kevin Rourke and today I'll be reviewing the Inquisitors Handbook for Dark Heresy. This was one of the first supplements that came out for Dark Heresy and I happened to pick it up early. It was made by Black Industries, but now it's published by Fantasy Flight. I have a nice softback one, which is it's one of the first run ones. Now you can pick them up in hardback, which is probably better off for you anyway with the amount of wear and tear you can get out of this. The Inquisitor's Handbook introduces alternate ranks for the Dark Heresy character. So let's say at rank 4 there's an alternate, you could, if it meets your character's background and stuff, you could go in, this is one of the things in the book, that you could substitute this rank for another, therefore fundamentally changing the class at some stage. Like some of these are for first level and it works out. Some of them are more questionable than others. There are some ones that can really let you use stuff you wouldn't normally do. This becomes quite common in the Dark Heresy books later on and in some of the other 40k RPGs, but at this stage, when it came out, this was the first one of them to do it. In that regard, it really depends and varies class by class. For example, the Mechanicus Sector is a good example. It's one of the ones that at rank 4 you can get access to. You have to meet certain prerequisites. But they're not too stringent as long as you get the GM's okay. And the requirements for the Unsworn Sector is you have to be rank 4. So that's 2000 XP into the game. You have to have a weapon skill, ballistic skill and willpower of 35 and be trained in 4 different weapons. You have weapon training 4 different talents. So you can use las pistols, las guns. You'll get most of those probably with a tech priest now where you can pick them up quite easily. But it changes the focus of the character to they are a more militant tech priest than normal, taking this one for example. And you can pick up lots of combat skills so they can actually reflect that. The thing is that with some of these classes you must think carefully because people taking multiple ones might be a bit iffy, particularly if they don't seem to suit a team. You kind of potentially cherry pick them and get something quite powerful. But as long as people are reasonable, it'll be okay. And the thing is, you're not losing terribly much sometimes because you can't normally get whatever you substitute out, you can't get the other rank unless with GM permission. I kind of advise you to 50 extra XP, which is it's quite cheap. You're generally but it works off. You can stick with the regular classes. It's fine. One of the other nice things that they have early on is that they have new homeworlds. So your character can be from a Forge world. This is later updated in another book, but it's nice that just with this book, you've got a character from a Forge world and the options that entails that you're brought up in the cult mechanicus. You're not used to, you get penalties dealing with member state ecclesiarchy, etc. Mind cleansed characters who have had their minds, obviously you're by default you're servants of the Inquisition. Is potentially that one member of your group has been mind cleansed and has memories forgotten. They've got a nice table that you roll up on that you could have just nightmares you have or different things that you remember. Things the mind cleanse was 100% success, which can be a good hook for the GM and the player if they want to come up with something. The player can come up with a basic idea, or the GM can say, well, if you want to play that now, they might have a great idea for it, or GM might go no. There's none says you have to sign this stuff. There's a lot of nice shit happens. Nobleborn is one you can have a lot of fun with. All these have different stat modifiers and give you different skills. Just run through them briefly. The advanced nobles, you pick a few peers. You've got peer nobility because you're noble, not a noble's going to like you. But depending on what your family is related, what your family is involved, what your family history is, you get a peer for that kind of group. And they have a table you can roll as well if you just want to be completely random. You also end up with a vendetta because nobody gets to be rich in Warhammer 40,000 without making a few enemies, even if you're born into it. But at the same time, you start off with a lot of money. It sets the amount of money you get as payment up, regardless of your class, up to nobility level, which is 500 a month, and I think a guardsman gets 50 a month. I think this goes up in increments as normal. But you start with double the normal starting with, so you're starting with 1,000 thrones, which is a lot. To be honest, in Dark Heresy, if you want to use a bolt gun, it's so expensive unless you're starting at a very high level, that you're almost throne agents or inquisitorial staff. You're like an inquisitor in his inner circle itself. It's not going to happen so much. But if you play an inquisitor, it can work out. They also scholar progenum that you were brought up, where they draw a lot of the commissars and stormtroopers from various. the Imperial Orphanage, for those whose parents were Imperial Guard or Imperial Navy officers and various other things. They have a nice table for that as well, like the history of your family. It might just one of the cool ones is that your parents were sent off to a distant outpost, and you'll be long dead by the time they actually get there, because travel can take that long if they're sent out somewhere very far away. They also have additional augmentations for specific worlds in the Calixa sector, like your character could be a Fear World character could be from Dusk, so it augments it and it describes these worlds, but it's like, yeah, it's pretty good. As well as this, it brings in background packages. Background packages you have to meet certain prerequisites for. Like sometimes they're all associated with a class in this book anyway, and you have to pay a certain amount of XP. And sometimes you may meet other prerequisites. This XP does not count towards your rank advancement, so you'll be a little bit behind other people getting into each of the ranks if it's enforced. I don't actually often see GMs really enforcing it that much, but they probably should. It's just a bad habit we've gotten into. And when you're going up through it, the background packages can be quite good because they give background on different things. If you're having trouble making the character, something's great, like you could have an Arbite who's involved in different, some of these big different cases, or there's ones for all the different classes, and some of them are quite interesting. Like if you want to play an assassin, the Marta assassins are from a death cult. It's an augmentation for the assassin class. You are a death cult. You're a member of a death cult, and in this death cult, it is seen as more pure and holy to kill people in the Emperor's name with simpler weapons. So this doesn't mean you don't eschew all technology. When it comes to your weapons, you're going to favor the mono sword over the power sword or chain sword. But you're so skilled with these bladed weapons that you actually develop the tearing quality with them, which is pretty cool. So if you actually you can actually run around with if you invest your money early on in a best quality mono sword, you can run around with that for the whole game until somebody chops in half with their power sword. But in theory you could like start with the weapon and end with the weapon with them. They also introduce a class versus a battle with big warnings on it saying, yeah, this isn't for every game. It works out pretty well. They later on replace this one of the other books, which I'll review later. They bring in a more updated version, and one of the big things with this battle class is they introduce, which isn't just restricted to them. There's one or two of the alternate ranks, like the Black Priest of Maccabeus and things, and that can get access. It's called a Pure Fate talent, where you're spending fate points to get these bonus effects. If you have this talent, you're supposed to be, you're a holy man, basically. You can perform minor miracles. I don't have so much of a problem with it here. Some people don't like that all it's just bad habit. I can get over that. I'm not in love with it, but you need to have fate points to actually make it work, which most NPCs aren't going to have anyway. Like more important ones will, but it works out okay here. It's got a limited number of abilities that you can count all your attacks as like holy attacks against a demon or something, or you can burn a fate point to resist psychic power. They're powerful, but when used, I've never played a character with pure fate yet. The missionary gets it in Rogue Trader as well. I think it's too easy, particularly later on books, to start overusing it. As well as this, they have some elite packages, is in one of the sections. And some of these are they're not as restrictive as the alternate ranks into what classes can go into them. Sometimes multiple classes, or there's no class restrictions, such as being a member of the Red Cult of Redemption, which you'll know from Necromunda if you know Necromunda. And with once more big warnings about that one not necessarily being suitable. I think actually that is the only, or one of two only advanced packages. There's the other one is the Cybernetic Resurrection. They're pretty funky stuff. You really need to really sit down with your GM for this stuff. And the Nascent Psyker. It's just that you don't necessarily have to be a sanctioned psyker to have psych abilities, but you are an unsanctioned psyker, which could cause problems. You might not even necessarily know initially that you're a psyker. You can develop, or you can buy these traits. These are not defined by classes so much. And then we've gone to this far through the book. We still have a substantial section to go through, and until we get to a good chunk of the book, I'd say about 50% of the book is what I'm going to talk about now, and I'm just going to briefly skim over it, is weapons and equipment. Primarily weapons. A few bits of armor and stuff, but it's primarily weapons, and they go a bit far with it. But the nice part is some of these weapons are redundant, so if you don't want to just keep going, this guy has a lasgun, this guy, you can actually start dealing with types of lasgun aside from las carbine. You can say, oh yeah, this guy has a a Drussian pattern las gun, which is just really heavy things. You've got basset, but you also have some quite nice weapons in here as well as more military grade weapons. They've divided up into the equipment sections up into the type of world they're from, which could be helpful for the GM if he's trying to cope with stuff. Plus, a lot of them actually do have a nice little description of what these things are. For example, in the feral world, they did throw muskets into the feral world because they don't want to give too much sex to things. But one of them are the lightning chains of Acreate and the lightning gauntlets of Acreate, which are made of this odd material, and lightning can be sparked off. And it's like, there's some cool stuff in there. And you go through them, and they've got lots of different nice bits of equipment. Some of them, once more, have been errated, but you actually get a nice little, 1 or 2 paragraphs on most of the weapons in the book, which is pretty good, and I do like that. They do have some other funkier gear. If you start really digging around in here, you can find like amulets of warding, which you can put into heavier armor, which you can have, as well as hexagram warding and armor, which is really can be really cool and quite necessary in some, almost necessary in some games with players. Although the restrictions on all these, they're usually ridiculously expensive. You have to be very high level or really make your Inquisitor happy to get your hands on these. If you dig through there's too much weapons and armor in the book for my I would have liked a few more, and special ammo things. But if they had a few more just bits of gear and tools, would have been quite interesting. Although they do have a substantial amount of equipment that all divide up into different worlds, including they have a war front area or something like that. I think it's phrases. It's the war zone section, has some heavy duty weapons, but has some nice bits. So if you, which I have actually had to use for the only war game I've started running, but it works out. If you really dig into it, you can find some interesting stuff. For example, I was playing an Ascension level game of Dark Heresy once, and I had recently, before that, been rewatching some of Babylon 5. And in Babylon 5, I remember the Techno Mages. I'd love to play a character like that. So I said, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I want to really play up the techno-arcane sorcery side of the tech priest. So my guy kind of talked about that. He was reasonable a lot of things. He wanted to understand how alien technology would work. He was quite, some people might call that questionable in some respects. Different tech priests are like, oh yeah, that's perfectly fine. He wouldn't use it, but he wanted to figure out how it worked so they could destroy it more easily. He just wanted to understand how it worked mainly, but this is the excuse he gave to people. But for him, I really want to play up the mystery edge, and I really dug into this book, found different things, because there's a large amount of Chrome starting off. The GM didn't mind as long as it wasn't something ridiculously bad. So I went, okay, grand. And at one stage we're on board a ship that Tau, this was set in Jericho, reached the setting for a Death Watch, even though it was a Dark Heresy game, which worked out quite a lot of fun. But we were trying to move away through a ship where there were Tau boarding parties essentially moving through, and they'd gotten a beachhead on this vessel, but we couldn't destroy the vessel for various reasons. But at one stage my character just started. It's like, one of the guys wanted to scout it. I was like, no, I'll take care of this. And he just reached into his robes and really played up the sorcery type thing. And he takes out, almost like Gandalf taking out the moth, he's this tiny little fly. And he just kind of whispers something to it in binary cant, the detector language, the secret language of the Deus Mechanicus. And he's talking to it because it is effectively a tiny servitor, which is called a picked fly. Actually, even though I'm talking about this book, I've just realised I think that's actually in Radical's Handbook, but I found some nice stuff in this. I'll talk about Radical's Handbook at a future stage. But I sent it forward, and the rest of the group was like, I didn't even know that piece of equipment existed, and I had this fly forward, going through the air vents and landing. And I also took out a little cockroach that had his hand. These are all pieces of equipment in the game, and I really did play up that, like, the other players are like, what is this? I've never seen anybody use this before. And it's in there. Towards the back of the book, you end up with a section, a bit more details on different organizations, and helping people flesh out characters. They do have a section called contacts, which you can spend XP effectively to have contacts. It's got a whole table on it, and what the contact is good for, what they know about, and different things. You can work out a GM. I've never seen anyone actually use it. I've seen a GM actually say, hey, I'll use this, but it costs XP to do this. So we quickly forgot, because we're so invested in getting peers and getting different abilities. I've never seen anyone actually use this, although there are negative qualities as well. So you could have a contact who costs 0 XP. It goes into different bits of equipment and expands on how the skills work, including some crafting rules for Dark Heresy, which works out. I don't love the crafting rules. The crafting rules, the GM can easily modify them, but they're a little bit iffy, but for something they just threw into the back of this book, it's not too bad. Let's see. There are worse ones later on. It's not so much of a problem though, but it's kind of cool because they do give additional costs for like exotic materials. So if you want to make your stuff and you just want the rules and not have to be pulling stuff out of places, then it works out. One of the gripes I have with this, that really is a bit of a bigger gripe, is one of the gripes I have with Dark Heresy, at least in the early stages. The gripe I have is that at the start of Dark Heresy, the rarity only went up to very rare. So you had scarce as plus 0. For trying to find stuff, there's table stuff, but it's like scarce, rare, very rare. That's it. So you end up in that situation where Stormtrooper Carapace is the highest rarity, and there's nothing, and all the other stuff is just, yeah, it's really rare. Some things they put in, specification, you have to be a member of Death Mechanicus, or you have to be a tech priest, or different things. Like, okay, fine. And they do have really high cost in these things, but later on they start swinging extremely rare different things. So if you're using this, even if you're just stealing gear from a Rogue Trader game or something, do bear that in mind and don't stick to rarity in this, because some of the stuff you see, force weapons in this are very rare because that's as high as it goes. But the next time we see force weapons crop up in a game is, I think it's an Into Storm, which I'll be reviewing soon, which is a Rogue Trader one. They're near unique in that, where you have very rare, extremely rare, unique, and unique is the highest. And that's a big jump. That is a big jump, because the modifier, I think, for very rare is minus 20 in Rogue Trader, and the modifier for near unique is minus 50, and you don't get a scaling modifier. That only matters, it makes sense if you have the Rogue Trader book. I won't go into it now, but it's a big jump. More interesting, in Only War, they actually have near unique as the rarity for the Force weapon for a Force sword, but a Force staff is only extremely rare. I guess they might have been thinking, a lot of people are taking the sword over the staff, want to give a bit more of a reason for people to actually start considering the staff, so being a hell of a lot easier to get it. It's interesting. The Force weapons are kind of crazy, because you're making an opposed willpower check with, after you've hit someone and done damage with your Force weapon. If you're a psyker, you make an opposed willpower check. Oh, you first have to beat the threshold rating, but that's 6. That's tiny in Dark Heresy. And if you succeed in beating this, you're basically attacking them with a psychic power, and you do a opposed willpower check. If you beat them, the number of degrees of success you beat them by, you get that many extra d10 in damage, which don't count towards, which your armor and toughness doesn't count towards. It's pretty crazy, and you will tear stuff apart. One of my players in the game accidentally, with a Force weapon, they were in an area which wasn't safe. There were lots of hostiles going around, and they were jumped by a group who had a Rhino battle tank. Well, it's not a battle tank, a Rhino armored personnel carrier. And they went in, the rest of the group was engaging these guys who just come out the back, but they'd left the ramp open. So he said, I'm going to run in, and I'm going to, basically use my Force weapon to really powerful. I'm going to blow a hole through the door to get to the driver's compartment. I'm going to kill the driver because I'm really good in close combat. He was using alternate rank in this called Templar Calyx, which is, these are very scary militant psychers, quite powerful. But he goes in, he takes out the sword, he smacks. It's like, well, you're after hitting an inanimate object. You're channeling the warp, but I can't say the warp's not going to do anything to it. But he's channeling an inanimate object, so it's like, okay, it doesn't get an opposed check, but I'm not going to give you like 3 degrees success. He does really well in willpower check. He hits more damage than a las cannon does. I just say, okay, you're hitting this in the inside, more damage than the las cannon does. You just melted off the front of the Rhino. So the group would be like, oh yeah, we can use the Rhino, we can get to where we need to go really quickly now, because our armoured car, a proper armoured car, had been destroyed. And he destroyed the vehicle. Like, they didn't have to worry about the Stormbolter, the Stormbolters being shot on top of it, but they were like, the rest of the group was like, you just destroyed a Rhino that we could have really used, because you decided to go full force with your Force weapon. He was quite a powerful psyker at the time, but it's like, that's the kind of thing that makes it irksome at times. A quite nice little bit of backgrounds and stuff. Some of the material in here is questionable, but if you can get it for a good price, Inquisitors Handbook. It still has a lot of nice stuff in it. Some of the stuff has been replaced later on. As I said, the rarity thing you have to keep an eye on as a GM. But yeah, it's not a bad book anyway. I think it's pretty handy. I haven't regretted buying it anyway because I've found it quite useful throughout the years. Okay, I hope this has been informative to you, and I'll see you again. Goodbye.